Morning, everyone. I'm here a little early, so I will. I'm just gonna wait like another minute or so. It's funny, something a little weird is going on with the lighting this early in the morning, so it's reflecting off my glasses. I'll see if I can read my prompts this far away. All right. Well, we'll jump right in. So, namaste, everyone. Thanks for joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning, actually. And in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it states, as long as there is breath in the body, there is life. When breath departs, so does life. Therefore, regulate the breath. Okay, we've got a dog out front, I think, that's instigating mine. So today's topic is Ujjayi breathing, a topic very dear to my heart because I only usually have a few minutes at the beginning of an asana class to talk about it. And I will stand by my comment. If there is not breath work in a yoga class, it's not yoga. Okay, call it a stretch class, an aerobics class, but it is not yoga unless there is breath work. Okay, period. So, excuse me, Ujjayi breathing is the basic yoga breathing that you do throughout your entire asana practice, and it can be used during meditation as a focal point. It's been translated as victory breath. Iyengar defines it as Ujjayi is the process in which the lungs are fully expanded and the chest puffed out like that of a proud conqueror. Okay, that is in Light on Yoga. Okay, I wasn't going to do too many visuals today, but I think this one's important. I just kind of take it for granted that people kind of know what I'm talking about here. So, okay, so here's the respiratory system. So, see if I do this. Okay, nasal passages, the pink area. This is what the blue area is called, like the pharynx. And I'm going to be mentioning the nasopharynx area. That's right where the two meet. The larynx, where the vocal cords are. The trachea going into the bronchi, into the bronchioles that branch like a tree into the lung tissue. And then this purple line is the very large diaphragm. It's a dome-shaped muscle that's right underneath the lungs there. Okay, just so you have a bit of a visual. Okay, so there's a few short descriptions of Ujjayi breathing that I've heard over the years. In Ashtanga yoga, they usually say breathing with sound. Darth Vader breathing, that's the most creative one I've ever heard. Um, a snoring sensation without the rattling in the nasal passages. Wind going through a pipe, and a breathy, raspy sound. Okay, I'm going to bring you through 5 techniques of how to do Ujjayi breathing, and at least one of them will resonate with you. Okay, first of all, get your inhales and exhales going through your nose the entire time. Okay, Ujjayi breathing builds up energy, also known as prana. That's where the word pranayama comes from, breath work, building up energy. And when you exhale out your mouth, it dissipates energy. Okay, that's why in a lot of, regular exercise classes, they're like breathe it out your mouth. But that will dissipate energy because you're kind of building up almost like a frenetic, tense type energy in those classes. In yoga, you want to keep building it up. So in and out through your nose. Okay, and if you would keep exhaling out your mouth in a regular yoga class, you would be exhausted by the end of the class. Okay, so the first technique, okay, you're going to flatten your tongue up to the hard palate of your mouth. Okay, and then let the back of the tongue drop down. So it's going to be kind of shapes like that. So the top part it'll be flattened up at the top, and then the back of the tongue. See if you can drop it down a bit. This will pull the breath up higher through the nasal passages, making the air hit the back of the throat, creating that raspy sound. Okay, so close your eyes and try a few rounds like that. That area of the throat is what I was mentioning earlier, the nasopharynx area. Good. Okay, open your eyes. Okay. This next technique, let me explain it first and then we'll do it. Okay. I've got these on, unfortunately, but you're going to plug your ears with your fingers and you're going to play with the breath until you get the loudest resonance of the breath. Okay, so, and also if you imagine your fingers meeting, like keep going, and where they would meet at the back of the throat there, imagine that meeting place. That's where you're pulling the breath towards that area. Okay, so once you close your eyes and plug your ears and just start playing with the breath and imagine where that meeting point would be of your fingers, pulling the breath towards that area. Good. Okay, open your eyes. Hopefully you heard me. Okay, so the next two techniques are a bit similar in that you use the same muscles in Ujjayi breathing as the muscles you use when you whisper. Okay, so we're going to whisper the first few letters of the alphabet to get those muscles engaged. Okay, so you're going to take a deep inhale, whispering A, B, C, D, F, G. Okay, do that again. Deep, deep inhale. Whispering A, B, C, D, F, G. Good. Now we're going to whisper up to letter C, and then you're going to close your mouth after that and keep exhaling out your nose and see if you can keep that raspy sound going. Okay, so deep inhale, exhaling, close your mouth, keep exhaling. And again, deep inhale, exhale, close your mouth, exhaling. Good, continue that breath. See if you can keep those same muscles engaged. Good, all right, you can open your eyes. Okay, so this next one, you're going to imagine you have a mirror in front of your mouth and you're going to fog it up like you're going to wipe it off. And you're using the HA sound, the ha sound. Okay, so take a deep inhale, exhale, fog up that mirror. Good, and again, deep inhale, fog up the mirror. Good. Now we're going to do the same thing, and halfway through that fogging action, you're going to close your mouth and keep exhaling out the nose. Okay, so deep inhale, exhale, close your mouth. Good. And again, deep inhale, exhale, fog up that mirror, close your mouth, keep exhaling. Then continue with that sound. Good. Okay, so last technique, number 5. Okay, close your eyes. I'll guide you through this one. Tap into your breathing in and out through your nose. See if you can manipulate the breath a bit. So internally, the inhale will sound similar to the sound so, and the exhale will sound similar to the sound hum. So hum. Good. Keep going. So hum. Good. Okay. Open your eyes. Hey, so which one worked for you? Okay, and I'd love to hear in the comments, or you can direct message me after class there. Okay, it's always interesting to see which one works for people and which ones don't. Okay, now the big question that comes up is why? Okay, why do we do this breath? Okay, we all breathe, we're alive, we're obviously breathing. So why is this breath so important? So it's something we do 10 to 20 times a minute and about 20,000 times a day. Okay, these numbers are actually lower for yogis, okay, because our lung capacity is increased and making our breath more efficient. Okay, so first of all, just reflect on the importance of your breath. Okay, what I tell people is, when a baby is born, when that first breath they take sets the precedent for, is everything okay? As long as that first breath is there, mostly everything can be handled after that. Okay, in fact, being born through the birth canal is what activates our respiratory system. We're squeezed into this world. Okay, our lungs are compressed going through the birth canal. So when we're released from the birth canal, our lungs instantly expand and we gasp. We gasp that first breath in that initiates us into this crazy thing that we call our life. And they've actually found over the years that cesarean babies have a higher rate of asthma. And they finally linked it to the fact that, since their lungs, their respiratory system isn't squeezed and compressed and activated like that, that it actually puts them at more of a risk. Their lungs aren't as developed. So what they're doing now is that when cesarean babies are born, they're massaging that rib cage area and stimulating that musculature and everything. So there's something also I find pretty poetic about the fact that we all come into this world on an inhale. No one's no one is exempt from that. And we all leave this world on an exhale. Again, no one else is exempt from that either. And what happens in between that first inhale and last exhale is this thing we call our life. Okay, so the breath is also how we expel waste products in the form of carbon dioxide. Therefore, the breath cleanses us, it purifies our blood, it keeps us not only healthy but vibrant. Iyengar states the purpose of pranayama, breath work, is to make the respiratory system function at its best. This automatically improves the circulatory system, without which the process of digestion and elimination would suffer. Toxins would accumulate, disease spread through the body, and ill health becomes habitual. The respiratory system is the gateway to purify the body, mind, and intellect. The key to this is pranayama. Okay, so that's why we do Ujjayi breathing. Okay, that is from Light on Pranayama. Almost look at this, check this out, 300 pages just on breathing, just on breath work. Okay, so 20 minutes, 25 minutes isn't too bad. Okay, so our breath is the vehicle for our words. Okay, breath carries our communication, how we relate to each other. So again, another important factor behind the breathing. Okay, next thing I usually tell people is you can go 40 days without food, okay, and 7 days without water. Try going 30 seconds. It's 30 seconds without your breath. Within 4 to 6 minutes, your brain cells are starting to die. After that, there is brain injury, coma, or death. Okay, so deep breath. And then breathing is, this is fascinating. It's the only physiological action in our body that is linked to the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So in other words, it's voluntary and involuntary. So, thank goodness for involuntary, because that's what allows us to breathe when we sleep at night. We don't have to think about it. Okay, but we can also manipulate the breath. We can breathe quickly, like in Kapalabhati, or we can slow it down, like we usually do in Ujjayi breathing. Okay, so this book, Science of Breath, is the bomb. Okay, I totally geek out on the information in this book. You can see it's very loved. A Two medical doctors collaborated with Swami Rama to do research and experiments. Okay, and that's what this book is based on. So East meets West. Yogis have known for thousands of years the benefits of pranayama. Science is now just technically proving what yogis have known all along. Okay, so some Ujjayi breathing facts. Okay, this one I throw in everyone's face all the time. 20% more oxygen is pulled into your body with Ujjayi breathing. And that's a really significant amount. Okay, and oxygen is what every cell in your body needs to function. Okay, especially your brain. Your brain eats up most of that oxygen. So I tell people, you just start doing Ujjayi breathing, you're actually going to start thinking more clearly. Okay, so yoga makes you smarter. Okay, the sound of the breath is, it's like a home base that you can use during your asana practice. Your mind wanders to whatever and you come back to the breath. And same with meditation. You can use it during your meditation practice. Come back to the breath, come back to the breath. And that sound helps you do that. In Ujjayi breathing, the opening in your throat gets a little bit smaller. So the diaphragm and the surrounding muscles in the lungs, they have to work harder. Okay, it's kind of like pulling something through a straw as opposed to pulling something through a large pipe. So those muscles have to work harder, so they actually develop, their strength increases. Okay, I need visuals for this next part. Okay, for the nasal passages. Okay, in our nasal passages, okay, we have these things called turbinates or concha. Can't, my fingers going the wrong direction. Okay, and they and concha mean just like a conch shell. Okay, and the breath doesn't just go through the nose and slip down into the throat. It swirls through those turbinates, and they're structured in such a way that the air spins as it's swirling through the nasal passages around these turbinates. And I compare it to the Disney World's teacups, how they're spinning in a circle as they're spinning in a larger circle. Okay, now the reason for this is twofold. Okay, that swirling air is warmed up and it's humidified. And before it hits the delicate, lung tissue that has all the alveoli, the air sacs in it. Now, those of you that have visited up north or have lived there know when you breathe through your mouth in freezing temperatures and that air hits your lungs, it's actually painful. It feels like, an ice pick getting jabbed into your chest there. Okay, so your body is 98.6 degrees. So that warmed up air is really a blessing. Otherwise, breathing would just be painful in weather, 70 degrees or lower. Okay, then the other part, the moisture part of that swirling breath, okay, that lovely mucus lining, okay, in your nose moistens the breath before it hits the lungs. Dry air makes us cough. Okay, there is surfactant. It's a kind of lubrication that coats the air sacs So nothing sticks to each other, in the lungs there. Moist air helps the lungs not to dry out. And a side note, those alveoli I just mentioned, that's where the oxygen intake happens and the carbon dioxide is expelled. We have 300 million of those in our lung tissue. If you spread those out, the surface area of it would be a half a tennis court. So that's why I tell people, breathe into your lungs like it's a half a tennis court of space there. Okay, it's pretty mind blowing. The human body is pretty spectacular. Okay, so now the other thing is, everyone loves this one. Breathing through your nose cleanses the air. All those little annoying, nostril hairs. Well, guess what? They filter out dirt, soot, pollen, dust, and all other kinds of cooties that we tend to breathe in. And you don't want that garbage in your lungs. The lungs do not clear themselves out very efficiently. That's why smoking and pneumonia, it's so dangerous. It's really difficult for the lungs to get rid of those toxins and that. Okay, so the last anatomy geek out. Ujjayi breathing stimulates the pituitary gland. This one is a little hard for people to wrap their brain around. No pun intended. Okay, so the pituitary gland is like the switchboard of the body. It controls the hormones for your breath rate, your heart rate, your adrenals, your digestion. So literally just by doing Ujjayi breathing, you can affect all those other systems in your body positively. Okay, so the way that happens is that, okay, the pituitary it sits in a little seat. It's called the sella turcica, seat of the saddle. It's the translation. In a little kind of nook in the pituitary gland, in the sphenoid, and the sphenoid bone of the skull is set way back into the skull. And that bone is very, very thin, and the nasal passages are right below it. So when we pull that breath up, it actually vibrates and resonates the sphenoid bone, which is stimulating the pituitary gland. Okay, now some people, like I said, can't really believe, well, how does the breath, resonate or vibrate a bone? And, when I talk about how thin it is, I tell people to go back to grade school and how all of us were fascinated by the Egyptian mummies. And also remember, they told us to mummify the bodies, all the vital organs were taken out of the body, put in jars, and placed around the mummy. So to keep the skull intact, the major part of the skull intact, the brains were removed through the nose. Okay, and it didn't take much to have a hook on the end, like a long hook, and shoved up through the nose, piercing that sphenoid bone, which is very thin, and the brain, they proceeded to pull the brain out through the nostrils. Um, so so your parents weren't too far off, telling you not to pick your brains out when you had your finger way up your nose. Okay. Yeah, I'm a true believer in that. We're all kind of 3 and 4-year-olds at heart in ourselves. So that's why I use the kind of gross factor, because it actually helps us learn. Right? So just a few last thoughts on Ujjayi breathing. I love when students share their expertise with me and uphold these facts even more so. So I have the lovely privilege of teaching an orthodontist from Germany. Okay, hello Ula. And it is over in Europe, it's part of their job to teach mothers to train their children how to breathe properly. Because when small children get their first cold, they have to breathe through their mouth to get the air in, and they will continue to breathe through their mouth until they are retaught how to breathe through their nose again. because breathing through the mouth, it's very easy and it's a lazy breath. So what's amazing is that when we breathe through our nasal passages, that when we're that young, the the palate, the upper palate, like I mentioned earlier, it forms properly. Our nasal passages expand, and then the palate can form wider. Okay, when we breathe through our mouth, okay, for consistently over many years in that, the palate will be formed very narrow. So then when our adult teeth come in, they're crowded and they're crooked. And that is why so many American kids have to wear braces. Right, I did. And it's because after that first cold, we just kept breathing through our mouth. We're mouth breathers in America. That's not a good thing. So as Patabi Joyce would say, the nose is for breathing, the mouth is for eating. Right? So sometimes when a student has been with me for a while, this is another one, and they've been practicing Ujjayi breathing, uh, they'll say, yoga's making me fat. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And but the thing is, I had heard this a few times, and I thought, okay, I've got to get to the bottom of this. I'm not quite sure what's happening. And then finally, I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, my shirts are tight. And I was like, okay. So you have to realize when you've been breathing shallowly for years, even sometimes decades, um, your thoracic cavity is going to be narrowed. It's going to be smaller. And when you breathe properly with Ujjayi breathing, your rib cage, your thoracic cavity is going to start expanding. You are not getting fat. Your lungs are just functioning properly. And so, those narrow shirts might feel a little too snug. You're not getting fat. Okay. um, so what I mentioned earlier about the the size of the lungs, the surface area. So we have a tendency to breathe into our lungs like they're these little sandwich bags. Okay, now what I want you to do is find your collarbone on one side, and then find your lowest rib, okay, on the waistline, okay, on the same side. Okay, now when you pull your hands away, I'm not going to fit in the screen. That's almost 2 feet long. It's like a foot and a half to 2 feet long. So you want to breathe into your lungs like they're buckets, not like these little sandwich bags. Okay, so this last thought, okay, and I love this. I don't know if I'll be able to find a picture of it, but your heart is nestled right between the lungs. Okay, so if you make a fist, that's the size of your heart, and then you have these 2 foot, long, like large buckets on either side of the heart. The heart pumps every single day, your entire life, and this poor muscle has to have blood circulating around it and through it itself to keep the heart healthy. And that's where the lungs come in. The lungs, when you inhale, will squeeze around the heart and allow that blood to circulate around the heart itself so that the heart stays healthy. So, in other words, when you inhale, you are giving a hug to your heart. Okay, hugs work. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is I'm going to bring you through a brief meditation. Okay, so close your eyes. Tap into that Ujjayi breathing, pulling inward. Okay, and a thought comes up, just let it go on the exhales. I'm going to time you, okay? When I tell you to start, I want you to count your breath. It's going to be 1 minute. Okay, so starting now. Okay, you can stop. All right, so open your eyes. Okay, so that number, how many times you breathe, you had the breath in 1 minute. Multiply that by 1,440. If I can get this in the camera there. Okay, so multiply that number by 1,440. Okay, and you can do that, after I sign off here if you want. Okay, and that is how many times you breathe in 24 hours. Okay, every single day. Okay, so great work, everyone. I really ran over today. I apologize. Okay, I hope the detailed information helps. Next week, I will finally venture into meditation as art and art as meditation. I've most of you know, I was an art major in college, fine art. Okay, so 12 noon next Sunday, the 24th, and see you then. Hari Om Tat Sat. And thanks for coming.